Okay, and thanks to all of you for being here. It's great to be in Tennessee. This is where people from the Northeast move, to Tennessee. No kidding, I've heard several people say that. I say, why don't we work on this election? It's coming up next year. And they say, nah, I'm selling my house, I'm moving to Tennessee. And that's why we get so liberal in the Northeast, because there's this drain of good people who come out in states like Tennessee. Okay, the latest poll numbers on President Obama are only 38% of the middle class now approve of what he's doing. 38%. And it's not because anybody dislikes him personally. In fact, I went to law school with Barack Obama. I knew him on the law review. Personally, he's a very likable guy. And that's not why there's such disapproval. The poor, here's what's really remarkable. The poor, 76% of the poor used to approve of what President Obama is doing. That number has fallen as of this week to 43% of the poor approve of what he's doing. And it's his policies. That's the problem. It's his policies. Now, I was interviewed after he became president because they tracked down a number of us who knew him on the law review. And I will say, none of us knew him well, because even on the law review, even back then, 20 years ago, he was very distant from all the students. He was on a path even then of being groomed to run for higher office, and he was very careful what he said. But they tracked down a number of us who knew of him, and other people would say, oh yeah, I knew him, he's a great guy and everything, and that's what everybody said. And I said, this was my quote, and it was printed in the New York Daily News, people are not gonna like where this ends up. That was my quote, and they ran it. At the end, after everyone else was, yeah, he's my buddy, we used to play video games together or whatever, people are not gonna like where this ends up. And the reason is, he's a likable guy, he's bright, but he's not engaged. He's not engaged in the problems. He's not working hard to do what needs to be done, and he didn't do that back at Harvard either. He wasn't working hard, he wasn't rolling up his sleeves, he wasn't getting to know everybody, he wasn't doing what needs to be done. And I went to a lecture just recently that was given by an African American who was at Harvard Law School at the same time. And he said over and over that he was there at the same time as President Obama, but he never met Barack Obama. He had never met him, even though he was at school at the same time. And the person who was speaking, it was almost like he blamed himself for that he had never met Barack Obama. And I went to him afterwards and I said, no, Barack Obama was not around that much. Nobody really knew him that well. If you talk to people who were at Columbia, when he was at Columbia, people said they didn't even see him. They weren't even sure he was there, the people who were at Columbia at the same time was. Well, he was at Harvard Law School. I mean, I knew him. But he wasn't engaged in the problems, and that's why we're in this situation we're in. Okay, Obamacare, that's what it's called. It's sort of a misnomer, because I don't think this health plan was his idea, and I'm not sure why we call it Obamacare. Some people say it's a pejorative, but I've heard people, liberals use it too. It's used by everybody to describe it as Obamacare. And the linchpin of Obamacare is it forces everybody to buy insurance. That is the foundation of it, and that is basically un-American to do that. To force people to buy something you don't want to buy. It's never been done before, and you can look through the Constitution, you can read it backwards and forwards and ask yourself, what gives the federal government the authority to force us to buy something we don't want to buy? In this case, it's health insurance. If we want to buy it, that's fine. They don't have to force us, but it's a product that we don't want to buy. It may not cover what we need to be covered. It may not cover the medical care that we need for ourselves or for our children, and yet we're forced to buy it. And Congress based its authority for this in the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause says the federal government has the authority to regulate interstate commerce. So if you're buying something from Amazon Books and it's located outside of Tennessee, Congress can regulate that. And you don't pay sales tax because Congress has not put a sales tax on the purchase of something from another state. And that's why you don't have to pay sales tax when you buy from Amazon Books or anything that's out of state and then shipped to you in Tennessee, If you buy in Tennessee, you do have to pay sales tax. But when you buy out of state, that's regulated by the federal government. There's no sales tax. Okay, but what is connected with interstate commerce about my decision not to buy health insurance? Nothing. It's inactivity. I'm not doing anything. I choose not to do an activity. That's not an interstate commerce. That's where the legal challenges are. And it's in a number of different courts. AAPS was the only national medical society to sue to overturn Obamacare. Our case is out there. There are other cases out there, and they're percolating up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had an opportunity to accept this case on an expedited basis, and it chose not to do so. So the Supreme Court is sort of holding back, and it has not taken any of these cases yet. And my view is that the Supreme Court probably will not decide this case until after the 2012 elections. And if you listen to congressmen, they'll tell you the opposite. I sat there and listened to a congressman. He said, this will be decided before the election. The Supreme Court's going to strike it down. The Supreme Court's not going to decide. It's not going to touch it. It's not going to render a decision before the 2012 elections. That's just the way the court is. The court likes to be the last one to decide. They like to have everybody else fight these things out, and then it will render a decision at the end of the day if it has to. Okay? If there's a change in Congress, if there's a change in the White House, then it may not have to. And that's what the Supreme Court would prefer to do. They'd rather not decide this. I feel that if the Supreme Court does address this after the election, I feel they will hold it to be unconstitutional. I think there are 5 votes there to do that. And if you look at the line of cases, there was the United States versus Lopez, where the Supreme Court struck down a law prohibiting the carrying of a gun within a certain distance of a school because it said that's not interstate commerce. If you look at United States versus Morrison, the Supreme Court struck down a law that allowed people to sue for domestic violence. They said that's not interstate commerce. And I think they will also hold that the decision not to buy insurance is not interstate commerce. But that's not going to happen before the elections. So it's imperative that all of us be as proactive as possible in the political arena and make sure that the candidates who are going to throw this yoke of Obamacare off our backs and off our economy get into Congress and into the White House so that this thing can be repealed. That's the goal. Now, we've got this double-dip recession. This morning, the news was we just lost our AAA credit rating with Standard & Poor. So we're now no longer the most creditworthy nation in the world. We're now down to AA+, and Standard & Poor says they may lower it again because no one's addressing the debt. One of the reasons for that is Obamacare. And the newspapers never link the two. They don't link the high unemployment. We've got 9.1% unemployment. The highest rate of unemployment for which a president has been reelected in recent memory is 7.18%. And that was Ronald Reagan. We've got 9.1%. And a reason for that is Obamacare, because businesses don't want to hire new workers if they're going to have to pay health insurance for these new workers, and that's just hanging as a cloud over everything. Now, Congress could repeal it. President Obama could repeal it. We're forgiving people. If he wants to take it back, say we made a mistake, you know, that's wonderful, right? He can do that. He can do that before the election. We can all say, that's great. You know, we learn from our mistakes. That's terrific. If he doesn't do it, and he's looking at unemployment of 9%, 8.5%, 8%, according to modern history, there is no way he can be reelected. Okay, just very briefly about Tennessee, what can be done here? I encourage Tennessee to level the playing field for doctors who are providing good care and providing charity care, for example, or have cash practices, to level the playing field so that doctors in cash practices and doctors who render charity care can survive and not get squeezed out by all these government plans. And another thing consider doing, consider leveling the playing field with respect to the issue of abortion. And this is what some other states are doing, where a lot of abortions are done and then the complications are dumped onto other doctors. And Kansas passed a law where it says you can't do an abortion unless the doctor has hospital privileges, unless the doctor provides follow-up care, so the problems are not dumped on to other doctors to take care of it. This could be done in Tennessee, and I encourage you to consider doing that. Make sure the good doctors out there can compete in a level playing field and can survive as government and liberal policies tend to squeeze them out. The medical board of Tennessee could be better. It's harassed a lot of doctors who are in cash practices. So there could be reform of the Tennessee Medical Board. Texas just reformed its medical board by passing legislation. So these are things that Tennessee can do to make it easier for a good doctor to survive in this difficult climate. Thanks again for being here.